Most know that King Louis XVI lost his head during the French Revolution, but few realize that the decision to execute Louis came down to a single vote, and it came from a shocking source. Nearly a millennium of French monarchy culminated in the reign of Louis XVI. France had known ruthless schemers, deranged madmen, and extravagant hedonists among its kings. Yet, it was Louis XVI who ultimately paid for the sins of them all. So, how did it come to this? How did Louis end up with his head at the guillotine's base? Born Louis Auguste in 1754 at the opulent palace of Versailles, he enjoyed every conceivable luxury. But despite the grandeur, he lacked one crucial thing: his parents' love. From birth, Louis was destined to be second best for one reason. He had an older brother, also named Louis. This older brother was bright, charismatic, and favored by their parents, who lavished him with praise and gifts, while largely ignoring young Louis Auguste. The neglect deeply affected Louis, but his grandfather's disdain was even worse. However, his golden brother fell gravely ill at 9 years old. Despite desperate medical efforts, including a risky operation done while the boy was awake, he died. The family was devastated, and Louis now faced the crushing pressure of becoming heir apparent. But tragedy wasn't done. Though the elder brother was gone, Louis still had his grandfather and father ahead of him. Or so it seemed. Yet just years later, his father, the Dolph, died at 36 from tuberculosis. Shy Louis Auguste was suddenly next in line for the throne. History remembers Louis XVI as one of France's worst kings, but ironically, he was intelligent. He was a good student, fluent in Italian and English, and learned history, geography, astronomy, and Latin. Well, his problem wasn't brains. It was crippling shyness and a lack of charisma worsened by terrible teachers. One teacher told him kings should be timid and overly cautious. Another advised him never to reveal his thoughts. It's obvious such counsel was disastrous. Among the things that doomed Louis was his infamous marriage. At 15, Louis married Marie Antoinette, a 14-year-old Austrian princess, as political alliances dictated. Marie was beautiful and social, but their union was a disaster from the start. France's alliance with Austria had dragged it into the costly and losing 7 Years' War, and Marie Antoinette was hated by the people from the start. Louis was distant toward her, and their wedding night was awkward and unsuccessful. The couple never consummated their marriage on their wedding night, or for years, after creating a significant problem. In 1774, Louis became king at 19, inheriting a kingdom in crisis, riddled with debt, and growing discontent with monarchy. Despite his intelligence, Louis felt unqualified and made several poor political decisions. To win public favor, he reinstated the Parlement, which were courts that could challenge his authority, saying, "It may be politically unwise, but I want to be loved." It was both unwise and ineffective. Another disaster was Louis deregulating the grain market, causing bread prices to soar. After a poor harvest, famine and riots erupted in the Flour War, which took months to quell, all in his first year as king. His political failures compounded with personal troubles, particularly the ongoing rumors about his marriage and childlessness. Though the couple leaked a story that they consummated in 1773, their marriage bed remained cold. Louis was publicly distant with Maria Antoinette, feeding gossip and pamphlets, questioning his manhood. The truth was complicated. Louis suffered from thymosis, a condition that made intercourse painful, and reportedly underwent circumcision as an adult. Though modern historians doubt this due to the risks involved, the truth is, Louis needed help. In 1777, Marionette's brother, Joseph II, Holy Roman Emperor, secretly came to Versailles to investigate rumors about their childlessness. Joseph was hands-on and wanted to ensure the marriage's success to secure the France-Austria alliance. The emperor interviewed Louis and Marie, finding them complete fumblers in the bedroom. Louis admitted to Joseph that he introduces the member, but remains still for a few minutes before leaving. No wonder they had no children. Joseph offered them advice, which had to have been at least a bit awkward. And a year later, Marie Antoinette became pregnant, much to the couple's relief and gratitude. But even after the birth of their first child, rumors persisted that the queen had an affair, and the king wasn't the father. Louis and Marie Antoinette went on to have 4 children and adopted 6 more. But rumors continued to swirl. In 1785, Marie Antoinette gave birth to their second son shortly after the arrival of the Swedish Count Axel von Furs, with whom she was rumored to have had an affair. The timing only fueled gossip, further undermining Louis' standing. By then, Louis had become a laughingstock in political liability. When he wasn't dealing with his distant wife, Louis XVI still had a country to run. Since his weak-willed and indecisive reign began, things had only worsened. France was on the brink of financial ruin. Louis planned reforms to fix the crisis, but no one would listen. Louis XVI wasn't inspiring. Palamon rejected every reform he proposed. Frustrated, Louis tried to assert his divine right and push through reforms anyway. He exiled magistrates, jailed lawmakers, and dissolved Palamon to rule without them. While kings had done such things before, Louis lacked the backbone most monarchs showed. Though he believed his reforms would help, he repeatedly caved to public pressure and revoked them. Nothing changed. France's economy worsened, and Louis's time was running out. Everyone saw Louis couldn't handle the job. Calls grew louder for a drastic solution. He needed to invoke the Estates General, France's Congress, which hadn't met in over a century. Desperate, Louis relented and called the Estates General for the first time since 1614. It was a Hail Mary, but unknowingly, Louis sealed his fate. Louis was terrible at politics. If he had his way, he'd spend all his time tinkering in his workshop. He was a bit of a nerd, obsessed with locks and woodworking. He took up carpentry, making furniture, and even tried to use these skills to bond with his wife. Using his carpentry, Louis allegedly made Marie Antoinette a spinning wheel, knowing she loved dresses. A cute gift. But Marie Antoinette thanked him, then promptly gave it away. Louis and Marie still weren't close, but worse tragedy loomed. In 1789, Louis faced every parent's nightmare. His son, Louis Joseph, a frail child with frequent fevers and a curved spine, grew weaker with time. At 7, the fevers returned, and he died. The loss devastated Louis and Marie, but France hardly mourned. The nation had bigger problems. Louis had agreed to call the Estates General, but until now it held little power. That changed days after the Dauphin's death, when the Third Estate took the tennis court oath. They renamed themselves the National Assembly and vowed not to disband until creating a constitution. Borrowing from the American Revolution, they aimed to wrest power from the king. The French Revolution had begun, and Louis was in serious danger. Louis, never forceful, faced this crisis at a terrible time. Public hatred for him, and especially Marie Antoinette, peaked. The royal couple, mourning their son, couldn't confront the uprising. By the time Louis regrouped, it was too late. They were doomed. Louis might have still believed he held power after the tennis court oath, but not after October 1789. An angry mob stormed Versailles, intent on violence. For centuries, the monarchy hid behind the palace's grandeur. But the people had enough. The crowd hated Louise, but despised Marie Antoinette more. Her lavish spending and foreign roots symbolized everything wrong with the monarchy. When the mob invaded Versailles, they nearly reached the Queen's bedroom only minutes after her attendants had whisked her away. The royal family escaped with their lives, but entered a new nightmare. Lafayette, head of the G National that had stormed the Bastille months earlier, diffused the chaos at Versailles and saved Louis and his family. However, the people dragged them to the Twitter Palace in Paris. Easier to control Louis there than at Versailles. Louis had no choice but to accept this humiliating relocation. Thus began the last chapter of his life as a prisoner to his own people. Louis's best hope was a constitutional monarchy, losing most powers but keeping the crown. But France was too divided. The Third Estate wanted to abolish monarchy, while Louis's brothers plotted counter-coups to regain control. These counter-moves only strengthened revolutionary resolve that monarchy must end. Meanwhile, Louis and his family remained prisoners in the gilded Tuileries. Louis knew he had to act to save them, but as always, he failed spectacularly. With no real power in the palace, Louis planned a daring escape with the help of Axel von Für, possibly Marie's lover. They would flee to Austria, regroup, and retake France. The plan was sound, but fell apart quickly. Louis did manage to sneak his family out of the Tuileries disguised as servants. They hoped to reach Austria within days and end this nightmare within a year, but things did not go as planned. Before fleeing, Louis left a 16-page manifesto rejecting the constitutional system and asserting his royal authority. But any man who must say, "I am the king," while running away is no true king. Had the escape succeeded, Louis would return triumphant to enforce those declarations. Instead, the manifesto became a 16-page death sentence. It circulated through Paris as proof of his treason. Louis's indecision and poor planning doomed the escape. After leaving the palace, the family made it only to a small village near Austria's border, probably feeling hopeful. But there was one major flaw. Being king of France meant being recognizable. His face was on everyone's money. A local man allegedly recognized Louis, alerted authorities, and less than a day later, guards seized the family and hauled them back to Paris. Louis's escape attempt worsened everything. Anyone still sympathetic now viewed him as a traitor, joining the enemy by fleeing to Austria. Louis had believed the revolution was a Parisian fad and that rural France adored him. The village betrayal shattered that illusion. He realized how isolated he truly was and faced the harsh consequences. Instead of safety and a triumphant return, Louis was locked up tighter than ever. The revolution, once simmering, erupted into flames. His failed flight destroyed what little hope remained for reconciliation. The final blow to Louis XVI's reign came just months after his failed escape attempt. Holy Roman Emperor Leopold II and Frederick William II of Prussia issued a joint declaration condemning the French Revolution. They declared that the safety and well-being of Louis and his family were paramount to all European monarchs, threatening vague but dire consequences should anything happen to them. This made sense from their perspective. No monarchy wanted the revolution to spread. However, they vastly underestimated the determination of the French revolutionaries. The National Assembly viewed Leopold and Frederick William's declaration as an open threat and responded with hostility. With Louis' reluctant support, they declared war on Austria. The French army, poorly organized and ill-prepared, failed miserably in its invasion attempts. Yet, the real turning point came after the Austrians counterattacked, invading French territory that summer. After capturing key border fortresses, the Austrian leader, the Duke of Brunswick, issued the Brunswick Manifesto, which openly confirmed what the revolutionaries feared. Austria aimed to restore Louis to full power and threatened force against anyone opposing them. Brunswick's threat was bold, especially as the revolutionaries still held Louis captive. The Brunswick Manifesto galvanized the French people. Louis could no longer claim to support a constitution when a foreign army invaded French soil with the explicit goal of reinstating absolute monarchy. A furious mob stormed the Tuileries Palace, forcing Louis and his family to ironically seek shelter with the Legislative Assembly. Though Louis had seen angry crowds before, this moment was different. Years of delay had led to this reckoning. 3 days after the palace was stormed, revolutionaries arrested Louis XVI and imprisoned him in the Temple, an ancient fortress. His fate was fiercely debated. 1 month later, the National Assembly abolished the monarchy, declaring France a republic and stripping Louis of his titles. No longer King Louis XVI, he was now Citizen Louis Cape, though he would not retain even that name for long. After months of imprisonment, Louis was dragged out to face trial. A silent crowd watched their former king shackled. He was provided legal counsel, but behind closed doors, Louis confessed to his advisers that he had given up hope. He told them to try their best, but he knew the court would find him guilty and sentence him to death. His only concern was to be remembered as a good king who tried his best. For once, Louis was right. His fate was sealed. Though a failure as king, when the sentence came down, Louis met his end with dignity. On January 21, 1793, Citizen Louis Cape was guillotined at the Place de Rivoli. Approaching the scaffold with calm resignation, he gave a brief, final speech. From the start of his reign, Louis had desired nothing more than the love of his people. Even at the end, he pardoned those who had voted against him, declared his innocence, and prayed that his blood would not fall back on France. Before he could say more, a general cut him off with a drum roll. Louis knelt willingly beneath the guillotine's blade, and with a swift stroke, his head was severed. The French monarchy was dead, but for his family, the horror was just beginning. Louis XVI's legacy was not yet extinguished. His son, now titled Louis XVII by royalists, represented a flicker of hope for monarchist restoration. The revolutionaries had other plans. They seized the boy from Marie Antoinette, attempting to brainwash him into a young revolutionary, aiming to destroy the monarchy once and for all by turning its rightful heir against it. Marie spent her final days in the Temple, desperately trying to see her son, but was often denied. When she finally reunited with him, the words he spoke were devastating, a product of his radicalized captors. Nearly a year after Louis XVI's execution, Marie Antoinette faced her own trial. Though accused of various crimes, the most shocking charge came last. Her own son accused her of incest. Though absurd, the tribunal, which already despised her, accepted the claim. Nothing could save her now. Within days, the tribunal found Maria Antoinette guilty. She and her council had expected this, but they did not expect the death sentence. She had hoped for life imprisonment, clinging to the faint possibility of eventual freedom. Instead, the sentence was death. Around noon on October 16, 1793, Marie Antoinette followed her husband to the guillotine. Unlike Louis, she made no speech proclaiming innocence. Her final words were a polite apology for stepping on the executioner's foot. With her death, only Louis XVII remained as the last hope for the monarchy. But his fate was far worse. He died in March 1795, likely of tuberculosis after years of brutal captivity. The autopsy revealed scars from abuse all over his body. With his death, the final heir of Louis XVI was gone, and the royal legacy was extinguished. Louis XVI was not a bad man, but he was a terrible king. Burdened by the failings of his predecessors, who ruled by divine right and mistreated their people. At his trial, 693 of 721 deputies voted Louis guilty of treason. But the real challenge was deciding his punishment. The vote for execution passed by a single vote, one cast by a shocking figure, his own cousin, the former Duke of Orléans. Once one of France's richest men and a symbol of the old regime, the Duke had tried to save himself by renouncing his name and adopting the revolutionary moniker Philip Eagle-Eyed. In a final betrayal, he voted for Louis's death, the deciding vote. Philip Egalate's treachery, however, did not save him. Months later, he too was executed by guillotine. Despite his name change and betrayal, the people could not forgive him for his origins in the aristocracy. His death was swift justice for both revolutionaries and royalists, and no sympathy was spared. And thus ended the tragic saga of Louis XVI and his family. Betrayed, defeated, and destroyed by a revolution they neither fully understood nor could control. Thanks for watching History Expose. If you love uncovering the best stories in history, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring with us. Don't forget to visit our main page, Factinate, for more incredible facts about everything.